Why, hello everybody. This is Mr. Phipps. I'm here to introduce another one of these mapping assignments for you. So last week I brought you the instructions for the mapping of the western segment of the United States. Remember, we're getting ready to have a quiz about all of the states. So you'll have a map like this with numbers on each of the states, and you will be required to use a word bank of states and plug the correct state in with the correct number that it goes with. So rather than give you all 50 states at once and say, here, label this and memorize it, I thought it might be helpful if we broke it down into smaller chunks. So last week you did the western states out here, last time. So you had a map that looked like this. And we talked about that is a simple assignment to label, no big deal. And you take a picture of it, remember, and then you submit your assignment, not through Canvas, but through your photo library. You select that picture from your photo library, you find the little square icon with the arrow pointing up, you hit that, you tell it to go to Canvas, you select that icon, and then you'll have an option of selecting which class. So select Social Studies 8, and then select which assignment. There's another drop-down menu with the assignments, and you select which assignment that you're submitting it to. Then it comes right to your teacher, easy peasy. Just have to know how to do it. So several of you had questions about that. I put a video up for my classes on that on Wednesday morning. I'm sure you've got a friend who knows how to do it if you need to ask, or you can ask a teacher, but it's a simple process. It just doesn't happen directly through Canvas. So today we're going to take another segment. So we did the West, and I told you for each segment I would tell you a little bit about the historical significance about that section of the country, and we talked about how that was the last part of our country to be settled, the last part that was added. We talked about the Louisiana Purchase here. That part was bought from France, and then we talked about how we got this whole section here from Mexico. This all from Texas all the way out through California was once part of Mexico. Look at that area that was once Mexico. How did we get it? We tried to buy it. They didn't want to sell it. Why would they? So we basically forced them into a war. And after the war, we made them sell it at big discount prices. We're talking Dollar General prices here. So we got this at a ridiculous bargain and started making money on it right away. And now California is our biggest population state. Texas is number 2. They're 2 of the wealthiest states we have. And basically the moral of that story is, sorry about that, Mexico, right? So that puts a whole other level of complexity in there with the whole immigration thing that's going on today, right? So today you're going to be dealing with a different region of the country. We did that. Today we're going to go with the South. So this part of the country right here. Right here. So as you're going to do the same thing, basic simple labeling, and then we're going to kind of put these together with those and the 2 other segments that we're going to do later on, and you'll be ended up putting all the puzzle pieces together, and hopefully that helps you memorize where each part is. So let's talk about the historical significance of the South, like we did with the West. I'll use this map up here. When we talk about the South and the North, we're really leading up to what this whole class builds up to. At the end of the year, when we get to the big event that everything's pointing to, and that's the Civil War, the American Civil War. The 4 bloodiest years in American history. Brother fighting brother, American fighting against each other. So when we talk about the South and the North, the original 13 colonies were right here along the coast, and we have to bring geography in there. Remember how we talked about geography being closely related to history, and you have to know your geography to understand your history? Well, it comes into play big time right here. When the northern colonies were settled, they wanted to farm, but they found that the conditions for farming in the northern colonies up here were not super great. You could farm enough to grow enough food for your family to eat, but for the most part, conditions were not set up very well for them to be able to grow food or crops to sell. We call that cash crops. The soil here is rocky. It's kind of hard to grow large fields because of so many rocks. It's also hilly terrain. A lot of it is, which makes it hard. And for the biggest part, their climate. The northern colonies, much colder. They had long winters, short summers, and just not very long growing seasons. So farming was just not the best option for them to set their economy up on. Instead, they used what they did have to go in another direction. They had lots of trees. Trees were in high demand back in England because of the shipbuilding industry. Remember, everything was used ships. That was the main way of transportation. That was certainly the main way you shipped goods from one place to another. And England had basically run out of most of their big trees. Here in the American wilderness areas of the north, lots and lots of good trees. So that was a great big industry for them. Whale oil. Whales like the cold water off of the coast of New England up here, and that became a big industry for them as well. They would kill the whales and use the blubber and create whale oil, which they used in lamps to light their homes at night. That was basically the main way you would light your home in the evenings, to be able to see, to read, or whatever. And also iron and different metals and minerals were plentiful here. So they could use that, of course, to make metal products and things. So they made their living and they set their economy up in what we call industrial economy. In other words, they made stuff and then sold that stuff. So it later became like a factory kind of an economy. In the South, notice they have a lot more area, for one thing. Their soil is good, and they had long, warm summers and warm springs and falls, and not that cold in the winter. They had long growing seasons. So they could grow a lot of different crops. They could grow some things down here that just won't grow very well in the north, like tobacco, which was the first big crop they started making lots of money on. And then later became cotton, and cotton became the biggest moneymaker in the nation. So the South saw right away that farming was their best chance to make a good living, and they set their economy up as agricultural farming. Now, about the labor. In the north, they had a lot of people, a bigger population in the north, even though it's a smaller area. So you had a lot of people living in a small area and trying to compete for work. So these businesses that were making this stuff, this industrial economy, they had people lined up looking for work, and they would work for cheap. So that's the way they hired their labor. In the South, when the first slaves came to the American colonies, it sealed their fate, because slavery worked very well for the Southern farmers who used slaves to do their farming work. Not as many people down here. People lived further away from each other, and it meant it would have been hard for the farmers to hire enough help to do all their farming. So slavery just fit like a glove down here. We're not even talking about the morality of slavery or anything. We're just talking about economic facts, right? So for that reason, the cultures developed differently. Not only did their economies develop differently, their cultures did too. So you had an agricultural economy with slavery built into their economy and their culture and stitched into everything they did. You had the northern economy, which is industrial, and slavery, although it existed in the north, never became a huge part of what they did. So as time went on, it became pretty easy for them to just outlaw slavery. It wasn't a big deal for them. So eventually it became slavery only in the South and not in the North. Now, that leads us to the Civil War. the whole course this year, we're going to be getting closer and closer to it because the problems that started developing between North and South because of slavery. As time grew on, and more people in the North started speaking out about slavery and how it was morally wrong, and the Southerners trying to take advantage of the new land we were adding out here in the 1840s with Manifest Destiny. They wanted to move their slaves and increase their farming operations. And when that happened, it all got political. And the North tried to stop it from happening. And that caused lots of problems. And that is what eventually leads to the Civil War. Eventually, 11 Southern states decide that they are not going to be part of the United States anymore, and they leave. They split from the Union, and they form their own government. They form their own country with their own president and their own government, and it was called the Confederate States of America. The northern states were still the United States of America. Their president, of course, was at that time Abraham Lincoln, and the president of the Confederate States of America was a man named Jefferson Davis. So we fought 4 years to get the southern states back into the Union. 4 long and bloody years, the bloodiest years in American history. Over 600,000 Americans died in the Civil War, both not just from battle wounds, not just from being shot dead on the battlefield, but from infections, from disease, and all that other gross stuff that comes with war, men being out exposed in the filthy elements day after day after day. It's not healthy. So if you add up all of the other deaths from all the other wars we've been in over our history, we're talking about World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, all that. Add them all together, and the Civil War still had more American deaths. So it was a huge blow to this country. And it's a blow that we're still trying to recover from. Because even though slavery ended after the Civil War with the 13th Amendment, the problems for the freed black people did not go away. In fact, in some ways they got worse, because they started passing laws to try to deny the freed black men and women the rights they were supposed to have. And that went on for another 100 years. And it wasn't until the 1960s, the civil rights movement that happened then, that those things began to change all the way across the whole country. And because of that, we still have the mess that followed with that. You know, when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, it goes back to this geographical difference between North and South. Do you see how everything's connected? So we'll talk more about this as we do these other segments of the country. But for now, that's your assignment, to label the states of the South and put that with your Western map and start memorizing where these states are a little bit at a time. So knock yourselves out, get this done. Peace out.